Hello and warm greetings. Welcome to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, where we would try to comprehensively analyze 7 articles in 2 different sections, along with the daily mains answer writing program. In the analysis part, we'll first have a comprehensive discussion with respect to the evolving ambit of the personality rights in the country, especially in the context of AI-generated deepfakes. Then in the second article, we'll have a discussion with respect to the draft seeds bill, the various provisions and the associated concerns. Then in the simplified section, we'll have a look at 5 different articles from a special perspective of UPSC Prelims 2026 along with the value addition. So stay tuned. Now before we start the discussion, let me wish each one of you a very happy Constitution Day. It was on this day years ago that we adopted the Constitution of India. May the Constitution, the values and the principles enshrined in it continue to guide us, and may we realize the vision of a welfare state in true sense. Now coming to the very first article, this is with respect to artificial intelligence, deepfakes and personality rights. Now the context is that the Bollywood celebrities Abhishek Bachchan and Aishwarya Rai Bachchan, they have sued Google and YouTube. They have filed a legal case against Google and YouTube, allegedly saying that their personality is being used to create AI generated content, and that content is being widely circulated on these platforms. What they are saying is that it is not only damaging their reputation and financial aspect, but it is also damaging their personality rights. Now, what you'll have to understand is 2 things. First of all, when we talk about the AI, it has numerous applications. It has the kind of application the AI has. It is exponentially growing. Along with that, there are some deep concerns. One of the concerns is with respect to the infringement of personality rights. Now, the question is, what is personality rights? See, the ambit of the personality rights, it's evolving in India. For example, there was a time when we looked at Article 21, right to life and personal liberty, in a very narrow manner, right? There was a kind of a very narrow interpretation which was done by the Supreme Court with respect to the Article 21. But then in the Maneka Gandhi case, what we saw was a broadening of the ambit of Article 21. Then in 2017, what we also saw, that right to privacy was made an integral part of Article 21, right to life and personal liberty. Now, when we talk about personality rights, this is a phenomena which is quite recent, and there have been many celebrities and people who are saying that their personality rights is being violated because of the AI generated content. When we talk about personality rights, what you'll have to understand is it's a mix of 2 rights. First is with respect to the violation of the privacy. Second is with respect to the violation of the property rights. Right, we'll see that in detail. We have this particular column which has been published in The Hindu, where the author says that India as of now has a very fragmented approach with respect to dealing with the violation of personality rights. So therefore, what she says is that we need a legislation, a robust legislation that defines what personality rights are and enforces the AI watermarking so that we can know that this content is AI generated. And there has to be a liability with respect to those platforms which are circulating these content. Again, it's a very, very important topic because we know, see, privacy rights, the right to privacy was once upon a time something which was one of the favorite areas of UPSC. Similarly, the personality rights is also again very, very important, a component of GS2, fundamental rights and technology. Reason being that we are looking at this picture from the perspective of the AI, right? Now, let's first talk that what deepfakes are all about. What do we mean by deepfake? See, AI has application in wide domains. For example, in knowledge systems, you must be using the ChatGPT or Gemini, right? For example, in e-commerce, the preferences, for example, in transportation system. Now, it uses machine learning. Machine learning has one subcomponent which is a deep learning. Now, when you use the AI for generating a content which violates the personality of the person, right? So that is what is known as the violation of the personality rights. How this is created? By generating the deep fakes, that is using the AI for generating videos or audios or any personality attribute which basically violates the privacy of that individual, right? So it's a synthetic, it's an AI generated synthetic media. It can be an audio, it can be a video, it can be a kind of likewise image of a person, right? It can be anything. which uses deep learning technique. As I said, the deep learning technique is a subcomponent of machine learning, which forms the basis of artificial intelligence. Now, what it does is that it realistically manipulates the personality of the person. That is, it would appear that a person is saying something or a person is doing something which ideally or in real sense he never did or he never said. So that is what the strength of this particular technology is, right? Now, the deepfakes relies on two things. The very first is generative AI models. For example, the generative adversarial networks. What do we mean by generative adversarial networks? See, in GNs, what we use is, we use two neural networks. One known as the generator, the other known as a discriminator. So we basically make these two neural networks to compete against each other. And we basically come and generate a very realistic picture or an image or a video or a voice. That is what the GNs are all about. Second thing which you'll have to understand is that in the AI, in the training of these models, the most important component is the data. So we already have a lot of data with us, the images, the videos, the songs, that is being exploited to generate these deepfakes. I hope it is clear. So in simple sense, what you can understand is that this is a fake content. It's not a real content, but it looks as if it is real. Now, what are personality rights? As I already told you, that the ambit of personality rights in India, it is evolving, right? It's the right of the individual, which basically violate the commercial and non-commercial use of their identity attributes. It can be the image of a person, it can be his voice, it can be his gestures or whatever, right? You must have seen that voice of Amitabh Bachchan or the other actors are used in various advertisements. That is what the violation of privacy rights is all about, violation of personality rights. Now, when we talk about the personality rights, it is primarily composed of two things. One is right to privacy. So if someone is in an unauthorized manner using the particular information or the personal information of a person, that is a violation of the right to privacy. In the second case, what you'll have to understand is that you are basically exploiting someone's economic right. So an individual has complete ownership on himself or herself. But if someone else using AI generates a particular content which basically imitates any attribute of that person, be it his voice or actions or gestures or gait, whatever, then that is a violation of his or her economic right. That is what you'll have to understand, which is a violation of right of publicity. Now, what is the constitutional basis when we talk about in India's case? As I told you, that we have Article 21, right to life and personal liberty, and its ambit was increased in the year 2017 when the Honorable Supreme Court recognized right to privacy as an integral part of Article 21, and this was recognized in Justice K.S. Puttaswamy versus Union of India. Now, linking that argument, taking that argument further, what you can say is that we also have a kind of a recognition of personality rights. Many a times, especially many high courts have recognized this thing, and we'll also talk about those judicial precedents. Now, why these deepfakes are a concern? Why this is something which is a serious threat to the overall society? The very first is that it is replicating content. It is replicating the image, the identity of a particular person, which is something which is very serious, right? So this is also being done without the consent of the person. As in this particular case, what these celebrities Abhishek Bachchan and Aishwarya Rai Bachchan have said, that without the consent, the AI generated content with respect to their personality is being widely circulated. So that is one of the very important points. Second is that it is spreading the disinformation. Here, one thing is very important to understand, to differentiate what we have with respect to the misinformation aspect and what we have with respect to disinformation. See, if you are generating the fake content, but that is not deliberate, that is, you don't have the intention to do that, and you don't have any intention to spread that, that is what misinformation is all about. But if you are generating a fake content deliberately to mislead people, to deceive people, then that is what disinformation is all about. Here, the intentions are of bad nature. There is malafide which is involved, right? Bad intentions which are involved. So this is spreading the disinformation. Third thing which I'll have to understand is that it is eroding the trust of the people. People have trust in the media. But if you will have these type of content, people will not be able to judge or discern or differentiate between the real content and the AI generated content. So therefore, it is eroding the trust of the people. Next is reputation damage. See, understand, when we talk about the dignity aspect, Dignity is a very core component of Article 21, right to life and personal liberty. So once you are basically without the consent, you are exploiting someone's identity attributes. So therefore, you are also doing a reputational damage to that particular person. Then it enables the extortion, fraud. Why? Because in many cases, there have been cases of cyber stalking. There have been cases of threatening. People are basically entrapped in that blackmailing, that if you don't give us this amount, we will spread this particular video, which is obviously an AI generated content. But again, that is a reputational damage to the person. So therefore, it is enhancing the extortion and fraud and other cyber threats. Next is, it is threatening the public order. Why? Let's say there is a particular AI generated video which is spreading the political hate on the basis of religion or whatever. This is a case of public order. So if it's possible, I really would love to know from you that what is the difference between law and order and public order. So please tell me in the comment section if someone knows about that. So it is threatening the public order. It may lead to riot-like situation. It can compromise the peace and stability in the society. So that is what you'll have to understand. So these are the concerns. Now, what is the key data with respect to the deepfakes? According to the study done by Europol, what it says is that by the end of 2026, almost 90% of the manipulated content in the internet, it would be sourced with respect to the deepfakes. So almost 90% of the online manipulated content would be on the basis of deepfakes. Then we have the research done by the MIT. What it says is that if you have a deepfake video and if you have a normal video, the chances of this particular video going viral is 7 times more than that of a normal video. So again, people, they have a craze for going viral, and therefore what they do is they make this type of content which is AI generated, which is fake, right? Then the NCRB, National Crime Records Bureau, cybercrime data says that there has been an increase with respect to the cases of cyber stalking, with respect to the cases of morphing of the data, with respect to the impersonation. You must have seen people are impersonating, they are fooling the others. Then there are cases with respect to the cyber fraud, right? So there has been a substantial and exponential jump in the last few years with respect to this. So this is a very grave concern. Now, when we talk about the India's legal position, what you'll have to understand is that there is a kind of a hybrid model, because we still do not have a very robust, we still do not have any framework, in fact, which directly deals with the infringement of personality rights. Right? India does not have a single statute on the personality rights framework. Do remember, there can be a statement in the prelims. We follow a hybrid approach where we first take into consideration the privacy rights, which are based on the dignity of the individual, and then we take into consideration the economic rights, which are based upon the publicity aspect. That is how you would economically utilize your personality to generate revenue. It can be on the basis of your attributes, it can be on the basis of your acting, it can be on the basis of whatever, your singing abilities or whatever, right? So that is what you'll have to understand. It's a mix of the privacy rights and the economic rights, hybrid mix. Now, when we talk about the constitutional provisions which directly can be linked to this aspect of personality rights, we have the constitutional article 21, which talks about the right to life and personal liberty. As I told, that we have privacy as an inherent component, so obviously it can be directly linked to the personality aspect. Then we have article 19 subclause 1 subclause A, which basically gives a right against the inappropriate use of someone's expression. Freedom of speech and expression, right? So if someone is inappropriately, without the consent, using someone's expression, that is also a violation. Then we have article 300A, which basically violates the right to property of an individual, right? So this gives the right that no one shall be deprived of his property save by authority of law, right? So that is what you'll have to understand. How property? Because I can utilize my personality rights for earning revenue. Maybe my voice, maybe my acting skills or whatever. So that is what you'll have to understand. What is the basis of statutory laws? What is the legal framework? Legal aspect. So when we talk about these statutory laws, we have the Information Technology Act. We have section 66D, which talks about the identity theft and impersonation. Please note it down, important. It talks about section 66D, talks about the identity thefts and impersonation. Section 66E talks about the violation of privacy of the individual. Then we have section 67 and section 67A, which talks about the sexual explicit content. So that is what you'll have to understand. So these are the three sections which can be used, which can be basically used in these cases. Then we have the intermediary guidelines. So under the provisions of the Information Technology Act, there were the guidelines which were issued by the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, which were amended in the year 2023-24. Now these guidelines talk about two very important things. First is what they say is that whenever you have such a deep fake content, it says to these intermediaries, these platforms, that it must be removed within a span of 36 hours. Second, what you have to understand, it also talks about the aspect of consent, that adequate consent needs to be taken with respect to those people whose data is being used. That is what you'll have to understand. When we talk about the criminal law, we have the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. Now, Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita has various provisions with respect to the fraud, with respect to the impersonation, with respect to identity thefts. So those provisions can be used if someone's personality rights are violated. Then we have the copyright and trademark law. So when we talk about the copyright, see, understand, these rights do not directly associate themselves with the personality rights, but these rights can be invoked when we talk about the personality rights. So how you can invoke that? You can say that my personality rights are being infringed because under the clauses of the unfair use, my personality rights with respect to the voice or the image or the video or whatever is being used in an unfair manner, right? So it's also a violation of copyright and trademark laws. Then what are the judicial precedents? Very important. So the very first case which we can talk about is with respect to Titan Industries versus Ram Kumar Jewellers. In this particular case, the court recognized the aspects of personality rights, the violation of the expression of the individual. So the court said that this can be equated to the violation of celebrity rights, right? Then we had the next case of ICC Development versus RV Enterprises. In this particular case, what the court said was that when you are looking at the personality rights, it should be seen as a mix of the violation of the privacy rights and also as a part of the economic right. So as I told you in the beginning, it's a hybrid of the privacy rights and the economic rights. This was the case, ICC Development versus RV Enterprises. Then we had a case of Amitabh Bachchan versus Rajat Negi. So you can see that the Bachchan family is too much occupied in the personality rights. So in this particular case, what the court said, that someone's personal attributes cannot be used without the consent, and unauthorized use is prohibited, right? Then we had the Anil Kapoor versus the Simply Life India case of 2023, a very recent case in which the actor approached the court and said that my voice is being modulated and it is being used, AI generated content is being used, my words, my dialogues of jackass is being used in various advertisements, so that should not be allowed. So the court said, yes, Mr. Kapoor, you're right, so this should be prohibited. Then we have Arijit Singh versus Codable Ventures of 2024, a very famous singer. So what he said was that this particular company, Codable Ventures, it has used a bunch of songs, almost 400 to 425 songs of this particular singer, and it is creating the fake AI generated songs, right? And attributing to this particular singer or the other singers. So this singer approached to the court and court gave a relief and said that this cannot be allowed. Unauthorized usage of someone's personality cannot be allowed. So that is how the ambit is growing. What you understand from this is that we do not have a robust law which deals with the aspects of personality rights. We have a very fragmented and reactive approach. And it's primarily associated with these celebrities. It's not something which is associated with the common people. But again, as you know, the privacy rights evolved in India, we also have the evolution of the personality rights, and therefore it becomes important. What is the international framework with respect to the personality rights? The very first is European Union. It talks about the dignity model. You must have heard about the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation. Now, this is one of the strongest framework to protect someone's personal information, right? Privacy. And it gives utmost protection to the person with respect to the consent. How? That if you want to use someone's personal information in that European Union where GDPR is applied, you will have to seek the consent. Whatever the information is, the consent is mandatory. Then we have the EU Artificial Intelligence Act. Now this categorizes the deep fake content as a very high risk category. So the AI Act, the EU AI Act, it has a tiered classification. It gives with a different categories. So the deepfake videos comes in the high risk category. Then what is the model followed in the United States? As we all know that in the United States, what is really important is absolute right to property. So over there, the personality rights are more correlated to the property aspect rather than the privacy aspect, right? Or the dignity aspect. And the laws varies by state. It was the Tennessee Elvis Act of 2024, which forms the first basis of protecting someone's privacy and making sure that there is no unauthorized use of someone's data, primarily in the form of the AI generated content. Then when we talk about China, we know it's a state-led structure where all the state has complete control over what kind of data would flow into the systems. And it was in the year 2023 that the cyberspace administration in China, it said that whatever content you are generating, AI content, you have to disclose it. There were crystal clear guidelines that whatever content you are generating with respect to the AI, with the help of the AI, the disclosure norms must be made very clear. You need to disclose it. Then we have the UNESCO Ethical AI Guidelines. Now, these guidelines were laid down in the year 2021. What they take, the kind of perspective they take is a kind of an approach of human rights and dignity framework. What they say is that when we talk about the consent and the transparency, they need to be made the base in the AI system. Whatever AI system you have, the consent and transparency must be at the base. That is what you'll have to understand. Now, what are the key challenges with respect to the Indian structure? As I said, that we do not have any codified law which directly talks about the personality laws. We have seen that in various cases, especially in the high courts, there has been a kind of a jurisprudence where courts have taken their own interpretation. They have come up with their own interpretation with respect to the personality rights. But still, we do not have a common framework with respect to personality rights. The judge-made architecture is there. And because of that, what we see is that there is inconsistency and weak enforceability. Weak enforcement and inconsistency with respect to personality rights. Then cross-border hosting. Yes, you must understand that this content with respect to any of the personality in India, maybe a general person also, it's very much possible that the data can be made outside the borders. So there is cross-border servers which are involved. How would you regulate that? That's a very difficult task. See, internet as a phenomena, it's transnational in nature, right? We cannot have a very robust architecture in place until unless we have a kind of a cross-border sharing mechanism, a mechanism with respect to the cooperation. But let's say if the video is generated in the countries like Pakistan or other countries, then it becomes really difficult to control that particular content. There are foreign servers involved, and this slows down the removal process. Then we have lack of AI specific provisions. We do not have any legal definition of what deepfake is all about, what synthetic media is all about. We are using the provisions of the criminal laws or the information technology, but we have not defined these terms. That is one of the very big loopholes. And this limits the prosecution. Not just prosecution, even the investigation aspect, right? So that becomes very difficult. Platform liability issues. See, we have for these intermediaries safe harbor protection. These intermediaries who are circulating the content, they are basically saved because of this particular provision in the Information Technology Act. So it becomes really difficult to allege that these are the platforms which are involving themselves in circulating the data. Because ultimately what you'll have to understand is that the amount of circulation which would take place, that is equivalent to the kind of revenues which they would make, right? Next is the frequent violations. They are not abiding by the rules and regulation. By the time they basically take a step, already it has circulated. You must have heard about or seen about that particular news of Rashmika Mandanna, actress Rashmika Mandanna, where the AI generated video was spread, right? So that is one of the very serious concerns. And also what you'll have to understand is that it is the kind of content we have on the internet with respect to the AI. It is targeting the vulnerable sections more. More than 90% of the content, according to a survey, with respect to the AI generated content, it relates to women. Right? So it is targeting women in particular. Then the enforcement and capacity constraints. If you really want to investigate or prosecute in a proper manner, that particular case, you need to have a very robust cyber forensics, but we do not have that. Then there is lack of trained human resource which can deal with these cyber aspects. Then risk of over-regulation. If the government would come and say that we are now going to regulate this particular content, then there would be people who would shout that you are basically hampering, you are hindering the process of innovation. So this innovation versus protection debate is also there. So these are the various concerns. Now, what should be the way forward? The very first is that we need to come up with a robust legal framework with respect to personality rights. We need to define it on a statutory basis, that what are personality rights, what it constitutes. Right now, we are basically interpreting it on the basis of the verdicts of various high courts, but we do not have a proper legal definition. Then the civil and criminal liberties must be made very clear, that these are the liabilities a person would face if he or she indulges in this particular activity. Then AI deepfake regulation. There has to be mandatory watermarking. Even in this particular column, the author is saying that whatever the AI generated content is, please have a labeling in that. Have a label that it is an AI generated content, so that people are well aware that yes, this content is fake. For all AI generated audio visual content, disclosure norms must be there. Whatever entity is involving itself in the creation or the spread of the content must disclose that we are doing so. Disclosure norms must be made mandatory. Then we have stricter penalties. If these entities do not basically follow the set of rules which are prescribed, then penalties must be imposed, and that should be stringent so that it can serve as a deterrent. Then strengthen the intermediary liability. So right now, because of the safe harbor protection, these intermediaries, they are not really very vigilant. They're not serious about this particular issue because they enjoy the protection under the safe harbor provisions. So that should be made very clear that you need to, if you have a kind of content which is violative of someone's privacy rights or fundamental rights, it needs to be removed ASAP, as soon as possible, right? So the time-bound removal is very much important. Dedicated AI and deepfake crime units. Very, very important. Right now we have, see again, India has really developed its capacity with respect to dealing with these cyber aspects. But still there are issues. So we have the Indian Cybercrime Coordination Center. So in this particular center, what we can have is a dedicated AI and deepfake crime unit, which can look into these aspects. Whenever there is a kind of an inception, a creation of such data and its circulation, it can track down that and stop its circulation. International collaboration can also be possible. So what we can do is we can go with a cross-border data sharing, as I said. So if the creation is taking place in the other country, it becomes really tough to track down, right, to remove that content. For example, in the G20, we can have a kind of an digital economy working group, which can look into this aspect, because this is something which is a concern for almost each and every country. Then we have public awareness campaigns. The government should come up with various awareness campaigns. In the schools and the colleges, people should be made aware that how to differentiate between an AI generated content and a normal content. Then ethical AI development. You must have heard about the OECD. It has come up with the GPI, Global Partnership on Artificial Intelligence, so as to usher in, so as to have a framework with a more ethical use of AI, right? AI principles, robust auditing with respect to the data sets. Yes, because see, these are the datas. The data sets are being exploited to generate this particular fake content. So it's really very important to do the auditing of these data sets. Ultimately, the AI, the machine learning uses these data. So data need to be made very clear. So what you'll have to understand is this is something which is a very serious issue. And as the ambit of the rights is evolving, as it is expanding, we also have the same case for the personality rights. One more thing which you should understand is that when we talk about the aspect of personality right, it is at the interface of three things. One is the ethics, the other is the law, and the third is technology. So this is the interface when we talk about the personality rights. This is also a kind of a diagram which you can make in the exam itself. So at this interface, it's become really important to have a very robust framework with respect to dealing with the aspects of the personality rights, because ultimately it is compromising the dignity of the individual if we look from the perspective of Article 21. And also it is compromising the economic right of the individual. I hope it is clear. Let's have a mains practice question. The question says, with the rise of generative AI and deepfake technologies, traditional notions of personality rights are facing unprecedented stress. Discuss the challenges posed by deepfakes to personality rights. We have discussed the challenges, and highlight the measures needed to balance innovation with protection against identity misuse. So please write this particular answer, a very important topic, a very probable topic for GS2 and also for ethics. It might come in the mains examination. And yes, if you're liking the initiative, do not forget to press the like button and also let us know in the comments. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, this is with respect to the draft seeds bill. So the Union Ministry for Agriculture and Farmers Welfare has floated this particular bill and asked for the public comments. Let's look at the picture in a very comprehensive manner. See, seeds form the very base of the agriculture. It is on that basis that we have the germination and ultimately the production of plants and crops. Now, in the 1960s and 70s, once we started the Green Revolution, there was a need felt that the farmers need to be protected. And therefore, it was way back in the year 1966 that the government came up with the Seeds Act. The very objective was to protect the farmers so as to make sure that they get good quality seeds. They are not duped. They're not fooled on the basis of the spurious or the low quality seeds. There has to be certification, proper certification and labeling requirements. That is what the Seeds Act talked about. And also in the year 1983, we had the Seeds Control Order. The very objective was on the similar lines. But with time, what we have seen is the incorporation of new things in the agriculture domain. For example, the extensive use of hybrid seeds. Or for example, the coming of the contract farming in the agriculture. Or in the recent years, in the recent decades, what we have seen is the incorporation of genetically modified seeds or genetic modification with respect to the agricultural species. So that is what is something which is not catered by any law. So this was felt by the government time and again. And it was way back in the year 2004 that the government came up with a particular seeds bill. But that couldn't be fructified. Similarly, in 2010, we had another attempt to come up with a proper framework which looks into this aspect of evolving technology, which looks into this aspect of corporatization of the agriculture. Because right now we have these aspects of contract farming. Corporates are jumping into the agriculture domain. So it needs to be regulated. There has to be a proper framework. But again, there was opposition from various stakeholders. For example, what the farmers said. What they said was that in a way, you are giving a leverage to these corporates. You're allowing these corporates to come into this particular domain and create a monopoly. This would obviously make us suffer. Because when we talk about the seeds aspect, there can be a scenario where a monopoly is created with respect to the seeds. So ultimately, we would be at disadvantage. You are incorporating these technologies. So many of the environmentalists, what they said was that we will not go with the genetic modification or the genetically modified seeds in the agriculture. Then we had these industries who said that right now we are already participating in the agriculture, but it's on the basis of fragmented laws. We do not have a robust architecture, which basically gives us the opportunity to contribute into the agriculture. So as to also make sure that farmers also share the profits. What they said was that there is excessive bureaucracy in the overall aspect. Then again, what you'll have to understand is that all these factors combined made the government to come up with another attempt, another bill than that was in the year 2019. But for the same reasons, there was a kind of an opposition to this particular bill, and this ultimately could not get the parliament's nod. Right now, we have the latest attempt which has been made by the government with respect to these aspects of the seeds, various aspects. So as to incorporate the technology, the market, the concerns of the farmers, making sure that if corporates are joining the agricultural domain, there has to be a particular framework of rules which has to be followed. So these are all the aspects which this particular bill is trying to basically cover. But again, there are certain criticisms. Definitely what you'll have to understand is and accept that this is a much regulated framework. The penalties are more with respect to if we compare the same bill with that of 2019, but there are concerns and we'll look into that aspect. I hope the picture is clear. So as I said that we have as of now the Seeds Act of 1966 and the Seeds Control Order, but it has in a way become obsolete. It is not really relevant because the kind of evolution of technology we have seen, the incorporation of various inputs in the agriculture, be it the chemical inputs or the machinery or the technology, or be it the corporatization of the agriculture. So that is not being tackled with respect to these laws. So the draft seed bill is sent for the public comments. Now, what you'll have to also understand is that in the year 2023-24, there was the seed demand in the country was almost 462 lakh quintals. But you would be surprised to know that the supply was almost 508 lakh quintals. Means that we had excess of seeds, primarily because most of these seeds are of low quality, right? And therefore, we have an excess of seeds in the market. So the market also needs to be protected. See, those players who are involved in the production of these seeds, they also need to be protected at the same time if we are protecting the farmers. So that is the need. Now, what are the key provisions when we talk about the new draft bill? The very first is that when we talk about the central aspect is the farmer's right. We need to protect the farmer's right. We need to make sure that they get the good quality seeds. In addition to that, we have retained certain rights, right? What are these rights? Farmers would have the right to grow. Farmers would have the right to exchange, the right to reuse, the right to sell the farm saved seeds. So if the farmers are saving certain seeds, they'll have the right to reuse, to grow, to do whatever. If the seeds are farm saved, these rights have been retained. The only restriction would apply in that case is if they are selling those seeds with a brand name. That would not be allowed. So if you are using it for your own purpose, or you are not using a brand, you are using it again, or you are exchanging it, definitely you can do so. But you should not use a brand, right? That is not allowed. Then when we talk about the different players have been classified in this particular scenario. In the whole seed scenario, in the whole framework, different players have been categorized. For example, the farmer or the dealer who deals in this particular aspect, or the distributor or the producer of the seeds, they have been clearly defined, right? Institutional mechanism. A particular central seed committee has been constituted, which would be of 27 members, and this would look into the quality aspect of the seeds, making sure that the quality is maintained. It would look into the field trials of these seeds, right? And come up with various regulations. Then we have the state seed committees. This would recognize and register these players, farmers, dealers, distributors, and producers. So this is at the state level, comprising of 15 members, and the proposed central committee would comprise of 27 members. One thing is also very important to understand here. What is the another case that why we have seen opposition to this aspect of the seeds bill or something like that? It's primarily because agriculture is a state subject. And what many of the states have said is that this is ultimately a state subject. So ideally the center should not come up with its own regulatory structure. So that has been one contentious point in this particular debate. Next thing which you'll have to understand is that the bill talks about the mandatory registrations. What it says is that all the seed processing units, they must be registered. There cannot be a case where a particular entity is not registered and it's producing the seeds. And there would be a central accreditation system. Why? Because if you have a seed processing unit and it is working at a particular distributor or a promoter or whatever, if it is working in multiple states, then over there, in order to promote the ease of doing business or to make the system more smooth, we need to have an accreditation system. Then there would be a national register, national registers for these seeds, right? Then we have the VCU field trials. What do we mean by VCU? We have the value for cultivation and use field trials. That is, we will judge a particular seeds on the basis of its cultivation and the value obtained, right? So this would be carried out with respect to the new framework, VCU field trials. Seed testing and enforcement mechanisms have been put in place. For example, the central and state seed testing laboratories would be set up. Now this provides a more diversified framework, right? A more devolved framework. Then we have seed inspectors who have been given the power to seize and to inspect these seed processing units. And if they are violative, if these units are found to be violative of these practices, then subsequent relevant sections of the Bharatiya Nyaya Suraksha Samhita can be imposed, right? Then we have the penalties. Now, what you'll have to understand is that compared to the 2019 bill, the penalties have been increased. So the penalties vary from 50,000 to that of 30 lakhs and imprisonment up to 3 years. So the penalties have been substantially raised, right? Now, what are the changes if we compare this particular draft with that of the 2019 draft? So when we talk about the offenses and penalties, as I told you, that this has been substantially increased. In the bill, we have, as of now, the penalties to the tune of almost 50,000 to that of 30 lakhs and imprisonment up to 3 years. But here in the last draft, we had from 25,000 to 5 lakhs and up to 1 year of imprisonment. It is also linking the farmer's right. We have a very robust framework which talks about the plant varieties, the seeds varieties and the Farmers Act. So we have the protection of plant varieties and the Farmers Act of 2001. Now this act in a very robust manner protects the farmers. The bill which we are talking about, it is strongly correlating the farmer's right with that of this particular act. It is linking the rights with respect to this particular act. Next is the tighter quality standards. It is making sure that the certification and the labeling are done in a very robust manner so that no spurious or fake or low quality seeds are given to the farmers. Then liberalize import policy. Now, it is also saying that we will make sure that there is liberal import of these seeds from the other countries, but subject to quality check. This is one of the arguments which many of the people are criticizing, that this would lead to a kind of a corporatization of the agriculture. What are the concerns? The first is fear of corporate control and pricing. We have Samyukt Kisan Morcha and All India Kisan Sabha. These are the bodies which are the pressure groups. What they are saying is that this bill in a way tries to go for the corporate dominance, because you are allowing the import of these seeds. You are basically making sure that the corporates come into the agriculture domain. So there can be a kind of a structure where corporates would decide that how the things would be run in the agriculture, what these pressure groups are saying. Threat to seed sovereignty, very important point to discuss. See, we have already seen that the case with respect to the BT cotton. So again, understand, there is one particular MNC which is Monsanto. So Monsanto supplied the seeds with respect to the BT cotton, but what we saw was that even these BT cotton were not resistant to the whitefly attacks, and many of the farmers suffered because of that. So what we are trying to say, what these bodies are trying to say is that this can create a monopoly with respect to the seed usage. Because the company Monsanto, it had almost 90% monopoly when we talk about the BT cotton seeds used in India, right? So this should not rather be allowed. Conflict with the existing safeguards. So what the people are saying is that we already have certain laws and frameworks and conventions in place. This aspect where you are basically giving an incentive to the corporates to come into the agriculture domain, this can be in conflict with the farmer's right. For example, as I told you that we have the protection of the Plant Varieties and Farmers Act. Though this bill is trying to link the farmers' rights with this particular act, but still we have some concerns that because of the corporatization of this seeds aspect or the seeds domain, there can be a scenario where the farmers' rights are compromised. Then we have the Convention on Biological Diversity, which talks about the fair use of the genetic resources, the biological resources, that has to be kept in mind. Then we have International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture. So again, these are the conventions, and therefore it becomes a kind of an obligation on India to make sure that the kind of rights and obligations which these conventions talk about, they must be followed in India's domestic statutory structure, in the legal framework, right? Then there are cases with respect to, there are voices which are saying that it can lead to the centralization and bureaucratization. Because as we saw that we have the Central Seed Committee, and at the state level we have the State Seeds Committee. So it is a kind of a very centralized structure. This can prove to be a very fragile structure for different stakeholders in the agriculture supply chain, be it the farmers, be it the industry, or be it the other stakeholders, right? Because it can also weaken the community seed system. Right now we have many of the farmers who rely on the community with respect to the seeds. So it can weaken that. Then farmer autonomy can also be compromised. If in the future, on the basis of rules, you give the dominance, you give the powers to these corporates to decide the prices, it can lead to the predatory pricing, or it can basically restrict the domain of the rights of the farmers to use their own seeds, right? Then it can also dilute the biodiversity protection. Why? Because if you give an advantage to the corporates to come up with their own seeds, produce high yielding variety seeds, so farmers would also be more inclined to buy these seeds, because for them profit motive is also important. So this can lead to monocropping, and this can affect the genetic diversity we have, the biological diversity we have. So these are some of the concerns. Again, there have been cases where UPSC has asked what the provisions with respect to certain bills and what are the concerns, right? So that's the reason we have discussed this today. See, again, what we are trying to say is definitely incorporating a statutory framework is really very important at this stage of time, because we have seen evolution of technology. We have seen different stakeholders coming into the agriculture domain. So it's really very important to have a regulatory structure, but making sure that it should not compromise the interest of the farmers. Because understand, we have more than 86% of the farmers who are small and marginal farmers. So they need to be protected. It should not lead to a condition where they are unable to even afford these seeds. Moreover, the aspects of the diversity must be kept in mind. Genetic diversity and biological diversity must be protected. So that is what you'll have to understand. Let's have a practice question. It's for 10 marks and 150 words. In the light of the recently tabled draft seeds bill for public comments, highlight the important provisions and also discuss the associated concerns. 10 marks, 150 words. Do write. It's an important topic and can be asked in the mains. Let's go to the next section. Coming to the simplified section, we have the first topic, which talks about the exponential rise of China as a lending power. See, whenever we talk about China, we commonly use the phrase debt trap diplomacy, where what we say is that China uses its borrowing power to give loans to the weak, smaller, poor countries, and then uses that particular aspect, that deal, as a strategic tool, so as to make those countries do what it wants. So whenever we talk about this, we have this aspect that many of the poor countries around the world, or the less developed countries, they have taken a lot of loan from China. But surprisingly, we have a different picture. In the last 2 decades or so, China has emerged as one of the largest lenders around the world. And surprisingly, what you would be really surprised to know is that we have some of the developed countries, and primarily the US, which is one of the greatest borrowers of the Chinese funds. That is the reality. A very important column in the data point has been published in the Hindu, and it talks about the various aspects. Let's first talk about the numbers. So what the article says is China lent more than $2 trillion in loans and grants to over 80 countries of the world and regions in the world between 2000 and 2023. More than 80 countries of the world, they have in one form or the other Chinese loans. The US was the biggest beneficiary, surprisingly, right? Over the years, Chinese state-owned entities have lent about $200 billion for nearly 2,500 projects and initiatives to American companies. Chinese state-owned enterprises, they have given loans to these American projects, right? Over 95% of this amount was lent by Chinese state-owned banks, enterprises and the central bank, while the rest was lent by non-state players. This is the map which you'll have to understand. US, look at this. Amounts lent, granted to entities in various countries by China between 2000 and 2023. Over 80% of the countries have received at least one loan from China. So this is again a very big feat, a very big achievement for China itself. More than 75% of Chinese loans to US companies were commercial, while only about 7% were for developmental purposes. So you can see that even the American enterprises are dependent upon the Chinese funds, right? Almost $201.9 billion. India, when we talk about India, Chinese banks lent or granted almost $11.1 billion to Indian entities, which is a very small amount as compared to these countries. Russia, just look at the amount, more than $170 billion. Map 1 shows the amount lent by China to various countries between 2000 and 2023. 179 out of these 217 countries and territories received at least one loan from Chinese state-owned creditor. China was the world's largest creditor and debt collector in 2023. World's largest creditor and debt collector. Not just from that perspective of debt trap diplomacy, which we usually apply when we talk about the weak countries, but also what you'll have to understand is that it has emerged as the largest creditor, even for these countries, the developed countries of US, Australia, right? Entities in Russia and Australia were the second and the third biggest beneficiaries in the last 2 decades, receiving almost $172 billion and $130 billion respectively. Firms in the 27 member states of the European Union received almost $161 billion. Countries in the European Union. Chart 2 shows the 20 countries that received the highest loan commitments between 2000 and 2023. And look who is at the first place, US. It is the US who has received the highest amount from the Chinese banks or the other institutions. 6 are considered as high income countries, which together have received more than 20% of the total amount. Look at this, US, Australia, UK, Switzerland. Then we have Singapore, Germany, right? About $943 billion was lent to high income countries overall. almost $1 trillion. Beijing is moving away from its role as an aid provider to relatively poorer nations as its focus has shifted from commercial lending for developed countries. So it is lending to developed countries for commercial purposes. That is what you'll have to understand. More than 75% of the Chinese loan transactions with the US were of commercial nature, while just 7% were of developmental nature. China's initial focus was on infrastructure development projects in economically disadvantaged nations. Chinese President Xi Jinping launched the Belt and the Road Initiative, One Belt, One Road Initiative, we'll talk about that, in 2013, which helped develop energy, infrastructure and connectivity projects in Europe and Asia, primarily Eurasia. China has scaled back on its lending to such projects, where the BRI once made 75% of China's lending operations. Now it makes 25%. What it shows? Two things. That China is now engaging itself bilaterally with other countries with respect to these deals. And the amount of funding with respect to these BRI projects has reduced, comparatively reduced, in comparison to these bilateral lendings to different countries, right? Chart 3 shows the share of the high income and the low income countries in China's portfolio. In a typical year, China spent about $5.7 billion on what can be classified as an aid for official development assistance. However, in 2023, China's global official development assistance fell to almost $1.9 billion. China has an 80% success rate for getting the overseas mergers and acquisitions approved. This is because of the relatively weak screening mechanisms for foreign capital inflow in most countries that China invested in. Because they are really thirsty for the funds. They just want the cash from any source. And therefore, China is ready to help. But again, it would then impose the different obligations. Indian entities have borrowed or were granted $11.1 billion from China. A large amount of this went into the energy sector and banking and financial services. So again, it's a security threat in one way or the other for India. Chart 3, the share of high income and low income countries. Look at this, the blue line, you can see, where we see that the share of the high income countries is increasing, whereas the share of the low and the lower income countries is reducing. Now let's talk about the Belt and Road Initiative. The BRI represents a multifaceted, multi-dimensional developmental strategy aimed at enhancing the global connectivity and cooperation. What you'll have to understand is that primarily it is a strategic tool conceived by President Xi Jinping, right? In order to make sure that China first develops a regional hegemony, which it has to a large extent already developed, and then it gains a kind of a dominance in the world politics. It was launched in 2023 and aims to link the Southeast Asia, Central Asia, Gulf region, Africa and Europe. Remember these terms because it can be asked in the prelims. The project was first named as One Belt, One Road, but it had a kind of a dominating tone. So therefore, it was toned down to that of the Belt and Road Initiative, but renamed as a BRI to convey a more open and inclusive initiative as opposed to a Chinese-dominated one. The initiative includes the two principal components, the Silk Road Economic Belt and Maritime Silk Road. So we have the land component and we have the sea component, right? The Silk Road Economic Belt. This segment of BRI is dedicated to improving the connectivity, infrastructure and trade links across Eurasia through a network of overland transport routes. You can look at this. So this is the aspect of the land, starting from these interior parts of China to that of connecting the European aspects. And then we have the maritime route also. This component, the Maritime Silk Route, emphasizes on maritime connections and cooperation in the form of ports, shipping routes, and maritime infrastructure. It begins via the South China Sea, going towards the Indochina, Southeast Asia, and then around to the Indian Ocean, thus reaching to Africa and Europe. Again, it is covering the Eurasian region in a very comprehensive manner. The objective, the primary goal of the BRI is to boost international connectivity by enhancing the infrastructure, trade, economic cooperation. This is what is the journal objective, but in reality, it's the Chinese hegemony, right? To develop and maintain the Chinese hegemony. The initiative encompasses a wide range of projects, including railways, ports, highways, and energy infrastructure. Geographic corridors, the land-based Silk Road Economic Belt has 6 corridors in its place. We have the China-Pakistan, very important to understand. China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. This violates India's sovereignty as it passes through the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. And therefore, this is one of the primary reasons that India hasn't joined this particular initiative. Look at this, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, right? Then we have New Eurasian Land Bridge Economic. This is the Eurasian Corridor. Then we have the China-Indochina Peninsula Economic Corridor. So we can see that we have China-Indochina Peninsula Economic Corridor. Then we have the China-Mongolia Russian Corridor. China-Central Asia West Asia Economic Corridor. And then we have China-Myanmar Economic Corridor, right? Previously, India was also a part of this, but when India saw that it's violating India's sovereignty, India was never a part of this, but China's authorities said that we would basically incorporate India also. But India rejected, saying that it violates the sovereignty of the country and therefore we would never participate in this particular venture. What are the issues concerned with the BRI? Debt burden, the debt sustainability and the transparency of the BRI projects, especially in the countries with weak governance, high corruption and low credit ratings. Sri Lanka, for example, or the other countries, they were basically compelled to lease out their strategic ports. Hambantota port, for example. Multilateral governance, the BRI is not a multilateral initiative, but rather a collection of mostly bilateral projects. This decentralized approach can lead to coordination and governance challenges because there is no unified system. There is no cooperative mechanism which exists. It's only on a bilateral basis. Political tensions, geopolitical rivalries and disputes such as the India-China border disputes have affected the implementation of BRI projects in certain regions. And that is one of the reasons, because since it violates India's sovereignty, we have not participated. These political tensions can undermine the initiative's progress. Environmental and social concerns, infrastructure development projects under the BRI have faced criticism for their potential environmental and social impacts. Many of these projects are damaging the environment to a large extent. They are uprooting the forest. They are disturbing the sensitive locations primarily in this Himalayan belt. So that is what you'll have to understand. Geostrategic concerns. The BRI has raised geopolitical concerns, particularly regarding China's growing influence and control over critical infrastructure in partner countries. Take, for example, Pakistan. The hydro projects or the other energy projects or the highways or the strategic railway lines, all are being done by China. So again, in a way, Pakistan is in the laps of China. It is almost completely dependent upon its resources. So this is, again, Pakistan would have to realize that this is a strategic threat for itself. In fact, a kind of a survival crisis for Pakistan, right? So this is what you have to understand with respect to the project. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, this is with respect to the grave health crisis which we are facing as of now with respect to the air quality issues, the dangerous levels of air quality which we have in the NCR region. Now, generally, we have this perception that starting from October, in the winter months, till February, we have very low air quality in the NCR region. And it is primarily because of the winter months and other topographical or geographical features. But we have a study which says that in almost 60% of Indian districts, this is a year-round phenomenon. The toxicity of the air is not just restricted to the winter months. Rather, it's a year-round phenomena, right? So let's go through this. People in 60% of the India's districts are exposed to polluted air all through the year, not just in winters, which we generally perceive. This means that 447 out of the 749 districts recorded concentrations of the particulate matter, PM 2.5, particulate matter 2.5, toxic chemicals and organic particles that exceed the annual safe values prescribed by the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, NAAQS. Not a single district in the country reported concentrations within the World Health Organization's guideline of 5 microgram per cubic meter. So let us not compare or let us not evaluate ourselves with respect to the WHO standards. Even with respect to our own standards, we are performing very badly, which is about the 8 times more stringent than India's own standards, right? The maximum number of polluted cities are concentrated in a few states. Delhi, 11 districts, Assam, 11 districts, alone accounted for nearly half of the top 50 most polluted districts, followed by Bihar and Haryana. You just Google and find the top 50 most polluted cities in the world. I believe almost every one of them would be from India. So that is the reason you need to understand that it is a survival crisis. And it is for that reason that many of the people, especially the youngsters, they are protesting. Because what is the use? What is the use of development if the very life is compromised? What many of the doctors have been saying is that it is posing an existential threat to the very humans. The average life expectancy in Delhi, it's reducing by almost 11.9 years for every person because of this crisis, right? The majority of the districts in Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Kerala, Sikkim, Goa, Karnataka and Tamil Nadu have population exposure numbers within the NAAQS prescribed limits. So it is mostly the South Indian states which are relatively performing better when we compare to the Northern Indian states when we talk about the pollution aspect, right? And also in the other domains also they are performing much better. Highlight The continued dominance of the northern and the eastern states in India's PM 2.5 pollution hotspots, while the southern and the coastal region remain relatively cleaner. The winter months of December, January and February are still the most polluted. About 82% of the district's recorded values breaching the national standard during this season, as emission increases and stagnant weather traps the pollutants near the surface. So we have in Delhi a saucer-shaped topography, right? It's a kind of a basin, and therefore the air is trapped, especially in the winters. There is no movement of air, and that aggravates the pollution in this particular region. The monsoon season brings significant improvement, with 90% of the districts reporting concentrations within safe limits. Let's talk about the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. Ambient air quality refers to the condition of or the quality of the air surrounding us or in the outdoors. Under the authority of the Air Act, that is Air Prevention and Control of Pollution Act of 1981, India's CPCB, Central Pollution Control Board, sets the national ambient air quality standards. What are those standards? Here it is. So we have the sulfur dioxide, we have the nitrogen dioxide, particulate matter 10, particulate matter 2.5, ozone, lead, carbon monoxide, ammonia, benzene, benzopyrene, and then arsenic, nickel. Do remember this. A potential question can be framed in the prelims, that what all things or what are the pollutants which comprise of the national ambient air quality standards, right? So you can just have a look. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, we have an order of the Supreme Court where it has upheld the dismissal of a Christian army officer. Why? Because he refused to enter the sanctum sanctorum of his regiment's temple for performing the puja. Supreme Court has said that this clearly violates the secular principles of the Indian Army. And in this particular verdict, the Supreme Court has also talked about a very important component of the doctrine of essentiality. We have the freedom of conscience and the right to freely practice, propagate, and profess religion. So what the Supreme Court says is that this particular right is only with respect to the essential practices of a religion, not to protect the other sentiments, right? So it's a very important discussion with respect to doctrine of essentiality. The doctrine of essentiality was initially proposed by the Supreme Court in the Shirur Mutt case of 1954. The idea behind this doctrine was to protect only such practices, religious practices, that are essential and integral to the religion. Non-essential practices, if they are found to be violative of the fundamental rights, would be struck down by the court. Indian Young Lawyers Association versus the State of Kerala, Sabarimala case. In this particular case, what the Supreme Court said, that why you are not allowing the women of the menstrual age to enter the temple? This is not an essential practice. So it struck down this particular bar of entering of these women to the temple. So over here in this case, even the former Chief Justice of India, D.Y. Chandrachud, what he said, that constitutional morality cannot be allowed to sacrifice at the altar of the social morality. That whenever we see, if you have a practice which is not an essential component of a religion, and if it is compromising any of the fundamental rights, that would be declared unconstitutional, right? Relevance of essentiality doctrine, balance religious freedom with the state regulation. The doctrine ensures that those practices that are non-essential to that religion get regulated by the state. For example, in the Dargah Committee Ajmer versus Sayyid Hussain Ali, the court declared that a clear difference must be made between essential religious practices and superstitious religious practices. You cannot claim every practice to be an essential practice. Prevent discriminatory practices. Many religious practices are discriminating, often harmful to any particular section. These must be regulated without affecting the spirit of the religion. In the Sabarimala case, I already gave you the example. Then we have, it preserves the constitutional morality. Essentiality doctrine enables the state to act against those practices that are violative of the core principles underlying the constitution. Liberty, equality, fraternity. If any of these practices violated, definitely it would be struck down. In the triple talaq case, the Supreme Court declared that triple talaq is not an essential practice and it violated the right of a person to lead a dignified life, maintains secularism, which is again a part of the basic structure. S.R. Bomai versus Union of India. The role of the state in ensuring that none of the religious or religious institutions hold unchecked power enhances India's secularism. Protection of cultural practices. Culture is often intertwined with the religion, and hence protecting these essential practices preserves the cultural heritage of the country. So this is again a very important topic, maybe asked in the prelims as well as the mains. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, we have the army chief who has paid homage with respect to the Operation Pawan. So Operation Pawan, the 1987 Indian peacekeeping force mission in Sri Lanka. What you'll have to understand is, till now, there was no homage which was paid to the kind of contributions which were made by the Indian soldiers in this particular mission for different reasons. But this time, homage has been paid to this particular operation known as Operation Pawan. Operation Pawan was carried out by the Indian peacekeeping force to take control of Jaffna from the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam, LTTE. So you can just see Jaffna Peninsula. This is over here in the northern part of Sri Lanka. LTTE disarmament was also part of the Indo-Sri Lanka Accord in the aftermath of the Sri Lankan Civil War. IPKF was inducted on 30th July 1987. The first IPKF operation was launched on 9th October 1987. IPKF was successful in taking control of Jaffna Peninsula from LTTE after a 2-week-long war. Many of the officers of the Indian Army and soldiers, they died in this particular operation. The operation was terminated on 24th March 1990. Though it achieved the stated objective, it is often criticized it does not receive formal commemoration at National War Memorial. However, Sri Lanka has built a memorial for it. And it is for that very reason that we have had a particular homage which has been given by the Army Chief for this particular operation. Can be asked in the prelims. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the last topic of today's discussion, this deals with a very important organization which is Amnesty International. So Amnesty International has said that RSF atrocities in Sudan, so we already know that the condition, there is a civil war going in Sudan and we have entities clashing against each other. This is leading to a kind of humanitarian crisis, including executions, rape and hostage taking amount to war crimes in the ongoing war. Let's talk about the Amnesty International. It's a London-based non-governmental organization founded in 1961. The organization aims to create a world where every person enjoys the human right enshrined in the UDHR, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and other international human rights standards. The UDHR was adopted in 1948. It recognized the fundamental human rights universally for the very first time. It also conducts the research, generates action to prevent grave abuses of human rights, and demands justice for those whose rights have been violated. Many of the times, there have been contentions also with respect to the Indian government, because Amnesty has also talked about the kind of grave human rights violations, alleged human rights violations, which have taken place in India. So therefore, it has been at loggerheads with the government also. The organization was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1977 for its defense of human dignity against torture, and United Nations Prize in the fields of human rights in 1978. Why this is important? Look at this particular PYQ of 2015, right? So Amnesty International is give the answer in the comment section. So here we come at the very end of the discussion. I hope you really enjoyed. All the very best. Thank you.